So I'm making this video because I have a personal growth project that I want to kind of describe for a couple of reasons. One is I think I'm going to be successful at it. And in the past, when I've been successful at these kinds of inner work projects, I tend to forget what it was like. It just seems like it's always been the way it is, even though I've made a big change. The second reason is because I think this may be of some benefit to you or some viewers here. The project is this. I'm calling it Project Uproot Sadness. What does that mean? Well, I want to get at the root of a feeling of chronic sadness that I've experienced for many years. In fact, for about 20 years, I was what I would call just straight up depressed. I'm not depressed anymore. I've overcome that. But there's still this lingering sadness. For 20 years, it was much more serious. It was much more that I didn't even want to be here, that I was stuck in states of hopelessness and helplessness. A lot of the time, there's sort of the background experience of what I would experience. And for 25 years, I was actually really anxious too. I had generalized anxiety and really intense social anxiety. And I worked on this. In fact, I worked on both of these things with a method called core transformation from Connie Ray Andreas, which was very, very effective. In fact, this was many years ago now, but I did it 500 plus times over the course of a few years because it was really working for me. And I feel like I got maybe 99% of my anxiety cleared out and 90% of my depression cleared out with that one method. Before the method kind of unraveled, it no longer made sense to do anymore. So I stopped doing it and I started exploring other ways of working. And for a while, I thought that was as good as it got because my life had totally changed. I had transformed generalized anxiety. I transformed depression. I transformed anger and all sorts of other things with this very powerful method that I'd spammed the hell out of over several years. And my baseline of experience had totally changed to something that was kind of like peace or beingness or something like that, which is what you get to in core transformation. And that was a wonderful thing. I thought, this is amazing. This is beyond what I ever thought was possible from inner work. I already done lots of meditation and ecstatic dance and read hundreds of self-help books and all this kind of stuff. And this had gotten me something way better beyond all of that. So for several years, I didn't really do anything. And then I realized, you know what? I kind of have this baseline anxiety still. It's like, it's not, 8 out of 10 like it once was, but it's maybe like 1 out of 10. It's just like a little bit of anxiety that's always there. And then something would happen, like I'd get in an argument with someone on the internet, or some stress would come in, and that level 1 would creep up to a 4 or a 5, and it'd become like a significant amount of anxiety. And so I thought, what if I could wipe that out? What if I could get to a 0 as my baseline? Like actually change the baseline level from a 1 to a 0. And I thought about this thing from Boy Scouts, actually, as a kid. When we would make campfires, there would be this technique for putting out the campfire. We thought, you just pour some water on it, you're good, right? And the scout masters were like, no, that's not good enough. And we're like, why? They said, put your hand over the fire. Can you feel that heat? And we're like, oh, yeah, I guess they can. But you can't see anything though, so it's gone, right? They're like, no, if the wind picks up, that could fan the flames here. It could fan the flames of the embers of that fire, and it could start a forest fire. So you need to pour a bunch of water, stir it, pour more water, stir it, pour more water, stir it, and then the embers will be completely out. Put your hand over it. There's no heat at all. And so I used that kind of approach with anxiety, and I found I couldn't use core transformation anymore. For whatever reason, that didn't have any more juice in that method for me. But what I found are these methods that I call pattern interrupt methods. So there's a bunch of these. There's tapping. So you can bring up something like anxiety and you can tap on the body in these spots, and you can do this and tap on the hand and these sorts of things. And what you do is you feel into the feeling first, and you rate it maybe 0 to 10, and then you do the tapping sequence. Takes 2 or 3 minutes. You feel it again. Maybe it's a 1 out of 10. So it has gone down significantly. You tap again. Maybe you get to a 0. So I started doing that. I started doing tapping. I started throwing a ball back and forth between my hands to bring the feeling intensity down, which is someone else taught me how to do that. I started doing these various pattern interrupts. And what I found is that I could bring the feeling down to 0 with 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds of this. Sometimes it took 30 minutes, sometimes it took 45 minutes. But I could bring that feeling down to a 0. So if I started with a 1 baseline, I would try to get it up as high as I could. Maybe I'd get to a 3 or a 4. And then I would tap or interrupt it some other way, like throwing the ball, get it to a 0, tap, do this in rounds until it was at a 0. And I thought, well, maybe that's the best I could do. But then I learned a trick. You try to bring the feeling back once it's at a 0. And I didn't want to do this. I was like, 0's good. I feel good. I don't want to do it. But I challenged myself to do this, and I could usually bring it back to a 0.5 or a 1. I could get some of that feeling back if I really tried hard. And so I thought, okay, well, what if I keep doing it until I can't get the feeling back? So I'd do 2 or 3 more rounds of getting to 0 and trying to bring it back. And then eventually I got to this point where I couldn't even bring the anxiety back at all. And that was an amazing feeling. I'd be thinking about all these things that just half an hour before were bothering me or were making me feel afraid or anxious. And I would just be like laughing. I'd be like, that's just so ridiculous. I can't get it back at all. Like, what's going on? It's just an amazing feeling of freedom. And so I called that state absolute 0 because it wasn't just 0 out of 10. It was 0 out of 10 and you can't get the feeling back at all. And so I started going for absolute 0 every day, very proactively with anxiety. And so I wouldn't wait till I felt anxious and then react to that, which puts you in sort of the victim role. The anxiety attacks, right? I get an anxiety attack. It attacks you. I was like, I'm going to attack it while it's sleeping. So I would get up in the morning and I would be like, I'm going to make myself feel anxious for no reason and try to ramp that feeling up as high as I could. And then I would tap or I'd throw a ball or I'd do jumping jacks or dance or something like that for 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, come back, try to get the feeling back, dance again, or throw a ball or tap or whatever. And I'd do this in rounds over and over until I got to absolute 0, couldn't get the feeling back. And I did this for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I was like, I can't get any anxiety. I'd wake up one morning, I'd be like, I'm going to make myself anxious like I've been doing each day. Nothing. I'd be like, surely there's something. And I would spend 30, 40, 50 minutes just trying to get myself anxious about something and failing over and over to make myself feel miserable. So I thought, this is pretty good. But I kept testing day after day for a while until I was just like, okay, well, there's just nothing to work with. I guess that's it. Is that it? I don't know. Is that it? Do I have no more anxiety anymore? Like not even a baseline? I can't get myself anxious no matter what I do. And I started just being like, what do I do now? I've had anxiety for 25 years. I've had anxiety. It's been a constant daily companion. And suddenly I would go entire day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, nothing. And occasionally there'd be a little come back up and I'd be like, ooh, yes, there's a little bit. And I would ramp it up and I'd throw a ball and I'd dance and I'd tap and then it'd be just gone again. I'd try to get it back, gone. I was like, maybe it really is gone. Maybe I've uprooted the anxiety. Now it's been many years since I did that experiment. And it's not that I've never felt anxious or afraid in that time, but it's been incredibly rare. Like I'll go sometimes weeks or months without feeling even a trace of it, as far as I know. Now, sometimes I may not be aware of all of my feelings, even though I've done a lot of meditation, a lot of inner work. So I might have felt it and it just came up and then went away. That's fine. Not a problem. I'm not concerned about getting perfection here. What I really wanted is to not wake up every day and feel 1 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10 just as a baseline level of anxiety. I want my baseline to be 0 and I can't even get any if I try. And I've been living there for many years now. So it was quite a while later where before I realized, hey, wait a minute, I'm still getting like irritated and annoyed. And sometimes I'll get like, it'll grow up to like full-blown anger, like at a 4 or 5 out of 10. And I checked in, I noticed, it's like with anxiety. I had a baseline of anxiety that I got all the way down to like a 1. And it was those embers, and they would light up a little bit when I'd get stressed. I had a baseline level of anger or irritation or frustration, something like that. That when stress would happen, it would go up a little bit. It would grow into this thing that would be full-blown anger after a while. And so I worked with it in a very similar way to the anxiety. I would try to get myself as angry as I could. And it may be only like a 3 or a 4. I'd be like ranting to myself about whatever I could. And then I'd throw a ball back and forth, or I'd go dance for 2 or 3 minutes, or I'd tap, or I'd move my eyes, or some other pattern interrupt kind of method. And then I'd come back and see 0 to 10, how intense is it now? Can I ramp it up? Etc., until I got down to a 0. And then can I bring it back? And then go to absolute 0 where I can't even bring it back. And it wasn't long after that before I woke up one day and I'm like, I'm going to try to make myself really angry. And I couldn't make myself angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed by anything at all. And I was like, oh, is that it? And again, it's not that I haven't been angry or annoyed or irritated or ranted since, but my baseline level of anger went down to absolute 0 as well. And I noticed something interesting. I would be in a situation where normally I'd be drawn into an argument and I'd start arguing with somebody, like especially on the internet. As you might know, sometimes people on the internet are wrong about things. And I noticed I wasn't getting drawn into the argument. Like I might respond with like a fact or something. And that'd be it. I'd just kind of like, there's nothing to say here. Nothing to argue about. Because I wasn't feeling hooked. I wasn't feeling triggered into the argument with anger, with frustration, with annoyance, and so on. Again, that's not to say that I haven't done any of that in the past 5, 6, 7 years, however long it's been since I did that experiment with anger. I absolutely have. I'm not perfect. I'm not going for perfection. But what I was going for is, can I get my baseline level of anger, annoyance, frustration, etc. down to 0? And I was able to do that with the same method I used for anxiety. So that's pretty cool. And I already worked with anxiety and fear and anger and sadness and depression with core transformation hundreds of times. So this wasn't me doing this for the first time, but this was me like after that method, I'd already squeezed all the juice out of that lemon. There was still this other layer that I was able to work with pattern interrupt methods. And so recently I've been thinking, could I do this with sadness? Hence Project Uproot Sadness. And I've started to work with it like this. I just did a session today, exactly like what I described. I deliberately brought up sadness. I'm not using a 0 to 10 scale anymore. I'm using something else I call the magic circle, where I write the word sad or sad duff in the middle of a sheet of paper. And then I describe my experience when I try to well up sadness, the body sensations, the thoughts, the feelings. And I write that all down around the circle. And then I spent 10 minutes like moving around. It could be 2 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, whatever. But I spent 10 minutes today moving around, dancing, shaking out my body, bouncing up and down, pretending I'm doing Tai Chi, kind of flowing like this. You could call it dance therapy, you could call it a pattern interrupt, whatever you want to call it. But it shifted my state. And then I came back and I tried to bring that sadness up and I just couldn't. And I looked at the things I'd written down before. I tried to remember those thoughts and get into those. And they just made me laugh, made me smile. I couldn't get them back. Just like with the anxiety and the anger before. So my goal here is not to never feel sad again. It's not that I have to not feel sad. It's not that I can't feel sad. Of course I can feel sad. I've felt sad thousands of times. In fact, in the last few years, it's really been a problem, actually. That in the afternoons and evenings especially, I'd get into these funks where I just feel kind of down. Not very intense. Again, 1, 2, 3 out of 10 for me. In the past, it was a 10 out of 10. It was, straight up depression. But it's not depression. It's not that I can't get things done. It's not that I'm not enjoying life. I very much am enjoying life. And there's still this lingering sadness that would come up for, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day. And in fact, in the past few years, it would also be associated with other sort of freeze state kind of things. We have fight, flight, freeze in our nervous system. Freeze is the defense mechanism, the last resort when there's a tiger chasing you in the savannah and you need to hide and be very, very still and quiet, or play dead so it doesn't think you're going to be a delicious meal. And what goes along with the freeze state? Well, lower motivation, right? You don't want to be highly motivated when there's a tiger searching after you. It's adaptive to have low motivation and not feel like we're doing anything. Feel like maybe you can't do anything. So I call it can't mode. To feel lower energy, fatigue, sleepiness, this sort of thing. Maybe to get a little brain fog, can't quite think clearly. And these are all the symptoms I've been experiencing the last couple of years. And, not even just the last couple of years. In high school, I had chronic sleepiness. I'd come home at 6 p.m. and sometimes just crash out for 12, 13, 14 hours and get up and go to school the next day. Sleeping 12, 13 hours was very easy for me for most of my life. So these are old patterns for me, but they're also just built into everybody's nervous system, the freeze response. It kept us alive for millions of years. So, my approach is this is a good thing. Thank you. Thank you, body, for keeping me safe. And I don't need to shut down every single day for several hours and just have low motivation and feel blah and sad for no reason. So I'm working on uprooting that, not because I never want to feel sad again. Same with anxiety and anger. It's not that I never want to feel afraid or angry. I'm okay with whatever feelings are there. I've meditated thousands of hours. I've felt my feelings fully. I'm not suppressing or repressing them. Expressing them all the time also isn't necessarily helpful. Sometimes it's okay, of course. I'm welcoming my feelings. I'm feeling them in my body, but they're still, for me, they just get stuck there sometimes. They just hang out for a long time. When I used to do 10-day meditation, Vipassana retreats, I could sit there with anxiety at an 8 out of 10 for 10 hours straight and just be very present with that, very peaceful with that. But I felt like, is that as far as it goes? And the instructors were like, well, eventually that anxiety will go away. And I'm like, yeah, but I've been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of hours and it's not going away. And that's when I found core transformation and found these other methods that you can actually work on the feeling directly. You don't have to just hang out and notice it. In fact, there's a metaphor I sometimes use I call the mindful mechanic. Imagine you take your car in to the mechanic, and the mechanic has studied Buddhism and they're very mindful and they say, yes, I can smell what's coming out of your car, and I can hear those sounds, and I can see the steam rising up. And that's all you need to do. Just be very present with those sensations. Cars fall apart. They're impermanent. It's okay. It's not a problem to be solved. Just be really present with that as you drive. You wouldn't be happy with that mechanic, I think, right? Now, you don't want a mechanic who's just in denial, who's like, there's nothing wrong. Plug your ears. Don't listen, right? But you don't just want a mindful mechanic. You want a mechanic who's going to notice all those things and take action to actually do something to fix it. And that's what the approach I'm taking. I'm very aware of the feelings. I can notice exactly where they are in my body. I notice when they come up. I can bring compassion to that. I think those are the good first steps. Instead of being in denial, like really noticing what's there and being compassionate and kind towards yourself. And it's okay to feel that way. It really is. You can feel that way as long as you want. You have a choice. And then bringing that choice in. Do I want to keep feeling sad for hours every day? Personally, no, I don't. So then I bring some of my tools to interrupt that pattern, to go do something else, shake off that state, literally move my body out of that frozen state. And then I come back and I try to bring it back repeatedly. So Project Uproot Sadness, that's what I'm working on. And I think I'm probably going to achieve it. Probably in the next few days, few weeks, because it hasn't taken that long in the past when I've really gone after it proactively, not waiting until I feel bad, but going after this proactively every day. And I already done thousands of hours of other work. So I think this is just the tail end of this sort of thing for me. Now, this may or may not work for anyone else in the world. I'm not sharing this because I think this is the only way to do things or the right thing for you or anything like that. I'm sharing this just as a record for me, and possibly this might be helpful for you. I've also been working on an article. It's not out yet, but hopefully when I get it out, I will put it in the comments or the description of this video about pattern interrupt methods and how to do them and how they work and so on. There's lots and lots of different methods, from tapping to eye movement stuff to NLP new code games, and just endless things that follow this kind of pattern of bring up the feeling by thinking about it, go do something completely weird and different, bring up the feeling again, go do something different, and repeat until it's clear or zero or absolute zero or whatever you want to call it. Very, very effective for transforming old traumatic memories, for transforming anxious anticipated futures, or even just your current mood or your baseline level of stress. And I think it can even be useful for weird stuff, weird stress syndromes like headaches, chronic fatigue, possibly chronic pain, IBS, allergies, autoimmune weirdness. I don't know if it's possible to transform all of these things, but I know that there are people who have done it and it hasn't been reliable. It's been sort of hit or miss. So I think there might be something here where we can work with that stuff. There might be lots of ways we can work with that stuff using imagination and pattern interrupts and all sorts of things, because there are lots of methods. Now, I don't think there's anything that's going to be one size fits all, or that you can say, this is guaranteed to work for you. I haven't found anything that's guaranteed to work for everybody in terms of clients that I've worked with, at least. But if you get creative, and that's what I like about the pattern interrupted methods. What I like about them is that we can get really creative. We can try different things as a pattern interrupt. That can also start to bring in resources too. Depending on how we interrupt the pattern, it might be something that feels really good or that connects us with something that we're good at. I really love dancing. That's why I like dancing as a pattern interrupt, or movement as a pattern interrupt, because that's a resource state for me. But if that isn't a resource state for you, maybe it's not the best pattern interrupt. So hopefully that video was possibly useful or interesting. I will hopefully post some sort of update when I get there. There are some things that are already opening up for me as I do this. One thing I've noticed so far is when I do like rounds of this and get to absolute zero with sadness, I have this new motivation that kind of emerges. The other night that showed up is like, I was scrolling Instagram, to be honest, after doing this several hours earlier, this pattern interrupt thing. And I had all these like thoughts of like, oh, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. And usually at night, I'm like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to check out, right? And so that was like this new motivation that opened up. And I realized that was because the sadness goes along with this can't mode. Like I can't actually do anything because I don't have any energy, which is itself maybe the freeze response, shutting down my energy. So having unleashed that can't mode and getting into can mode, there's all these possibilities of things I could do that I now want to do. So I'm finding I'm getting more motivation coming back and less shutting down when I'm stressed, less wanting to go take a nap and go into the fetal position and just shut down and scroll and eat junk food. Not that I'm not doing some of that still, because I'm working on it. So again, goal is not perfection, but just to see how far I can get with this. And I don't know anybody else who's done this sort of thing. So I'd like to share it just to see maybe there's some like-minded people out there who have done this or want to experiment with this. It might be fun. Thanks for listening. Have a great one. Hey, and if you want one-on-one coaching or hypnosis, boulderhypnosisworks.com. boulderhypnosisworks.com. That's right. That's where you can find me and sign up for sessions and so on. Take care.